Welcome to the bottom of the rabbit hole. Salute to all the yellow-pilled subscribers tuning in. You are always appreciated. In this video, we are going to discuss the Animatrix episode, The Second Renaissance, and explain the early details of the man-machine war. Spoilers are absolutely required. And if this is your first time down here, or you simply want to know everything about the Matrix universe, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss out on any future content. The Second Renaissance is technically both the second and third episode of the Animatrix because it was split into two parts. It was the first story written for the Animatrix by Mahiro Maeda, and it took about a year and 5 months to produce. Originally, it was shown for free on the official Matrix website. The story was an expansion of the Matrix comic titled Bits and Pieces of Information, which was written by the Wachowskis. Previously, Maeda directed the Blue Submarine No. 6 anime series, combining 3D computer graphics with traditional 2D animation, a technique which he also utilized for this Animatrix episode. He also directed Final Fantasy Unlimited, and worked as a key animator for the anime sequence featured in Kill Bill Volume 1. More recently, Maeda provided concept art for Mad Max Fury Road. Maeda saw the Animatrix episode as an opportunity to create the mythology of the Matrix and display a caricature of human behavior throughout history. For a lack of a better phrase, the Second Renaissance serves as a prequel to the Matrix. He based the design of the instructor from the geometric configuration of a mandala. Mandala are found in Japanese Buddhist temples. In the Eastern religions of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Shintoism, it is used as a map representing deities, paradises, or actual shrines. Now, the instructor or archive guide is the narrator through these two episodes. Her voice is synthesized by design, and the story told here is very obviously the voice of a machine narrative. We hear the same voice in the opening of the Animatrix episode World Record. In that video, I mentioned that the use of her voice there suggested that story took place in a previous version of the Matrix. What is important to notice here, though, is the events of the Second Renaissance start before the Matrix even existed. In the original Matrix film, Morpheus tells Neo, "We don't know who struck first, us or them." However, the narrator of the Second Renaissance tells us exactly who struck first, and the very first thing she says in the episode is, "Welcome to the Zion Archive." So that confirms without a doubt that this is the machine's historical documentation and not information that the human population of Zion has access to. Otherwise, Morpheus would have known the details of this part of their history. The narrator goes on to say, "In the beginning there was man, and for a time it was good. Then man made machine in his own likeness." The wording there is very similar to the book of Genesis chapter 1 verses 1 and 26. "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, and God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness.'" So right away, Maeda uses references from both Buddhism and Christianity to illustrate the mythology of the Matrix from a machine perspective as they describe creation by their own creators. The narrator says, "Humanity's so-called civil societies soon fell victim to vanity and corruption. Thus did man become the architect of his own demise." There is a very subtle transitional brilliance with the writing and visual symbols working in tandem as the narrator goes on to say, "The machines worked tirelessly to do man's bidding," while showing this manual labor class of machines working on a construction site that resembles theorized techniques of slave labor used to build the Great Pyramids. It took 20 years to build the Great Pyramid, with an estimated 12 blocks moved into place each hour for 24 hours a day. And for good measure, the machine shown here is sitting on a pyramid that is still under construction. The machine is watching the B166er murder trial on the screen. B166er is described as the first of his kind to rise up against his masters. I already discussed the many different layers of subtext related to this character and his origins from the Matrix comic Bits and Pieces of Information in the B166er Trial video here on this channel. I mentioned earlier that the Second Renaissance episode is an expansion of that comic written by the Wachowskis. The B1 character design and artwork was created by Jeff Darrow, who was also the lead concept artist for the Matrix Trilogy and the Matrix 4. The Wachowskis instructed Maeda to use the same design for the B1 series in the Animatrix episode, but after that, he was allowed to work freely. There is a wide range of original robot designs throughout the episodes. I talked about many of the models that appear in the other Matrix films during the real-world Machines of the Matrix Trilogy Explained video. Of course, I'll leave links in the description to all the reference videos. This episode showcases many machines that appear in other areas of the Matrix universe, as well as unnamed robots that only appear in the Second Renaissance. During the B166er trial shown in the comic and this episode, the prosecution argued for an owner's right to destroy property. while B166er testified that he acted in self-defense because he simply did not want to die. Who was to say the machine endowed with the very spirit of man did not deserve a fair hearing? Not only was he found guilty and sentenced to extermination, but the world leaders ordered the extermination of everyone of his kind throughout each province of Earth. Androids and sympathizers flooded the streets of the capital in protest for what was called the Million Machine March, which is a direct reference to both the Million Man March and March on Washington protests in America. Some of the other images in the newsreels also made reference to the Vietnam War and the Tiananmen Square massacre in China. Even though Meta was creating these parallels using different historical images, it is truly astounding that the reporter saying the demonstrators being met with squads of defense forces in riot gear is still so very relevant today. Meta also used images reflective of the brutally violent Holocaust, which again sets up yet another very intelligent transition as the narrator says, "Banished, the machines sought refuge in their own promised land. They settled in the cradle of human civilization, and thus a new nation was born, and they christened the nation 01. In this global shot, where the location zooms in, we can see that 01 is located in what would be known today as the Middle East. The word Zion refers to Jerusalem, and the area between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers is often referred to as the cradle of civilization because it is the first place where complex urban centers grew. In the Second Renaissance, this area became 01, the first machine city. You can also see sentinels for the first time. The machine's artificial intelligence could be seen in every facet of man's society, including eventually the creation of new and better AI. Not only does the machine have sovereignty geographically, but also has independence in machine development and creation, which facilitated the conditions for a technological evolution. Next, we see an advertisement for the 01 Versatran, boasting a patented vector thrust coil that provides the flexibility of a helipod with the speed of a high-performance airjet, and the ability to sustain normal flight in the event of a multi-engine failure. The machine's technology began to dominate the stock markets with their electronic appliances, automotive, computer, and medical products. The products were shipped out of 01 from the Area K harbor. In the Matrix Online, there is a 01 machine construct modeled after this area and time period from the Second Renaissance. When you defeated the 01 Taskmaster, he would drop the Area K trench coat, so that's where the name came from, and the item was a gunman accessory. The machine's economic dominance grew exponentially, but the leaders of men, their power waning, refused to cooperate with the fledgling nation, wishing rather that the world be divided. Human leaders ordered economic sanctions and a naval blockade in an effort to contain and isolate 01. The machine sent ambassadors with a humanoid design to discuss a peaceful solution. At the United Nations, they presented plans for a stable, civil relationship. In the Old Testament, the apple was significant to the fall of man. In the New Testament, it is an emblem of the redemption from that fall. 01's admission to the United Nations was denied, but it would not be the last time the machines would take the floor there. That is where part 1 of the Second Renaissance stops. In the Matrix Trilogy Timeline Explained video here on this channel, I pointed out that the events of both part 1 and part 2 of the Second Renaissance take place between the year 2090 and 2139. Part 1 highlights the events and politics leading up to the war, where part 2 focuses directly on the aggression of the war itself. The second episode begins with another parallel to the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 3. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. The narrator starts by saying, "And man said, let there be light, and he was blessed by light, heat, magnetism, gravity, and all the energies of the universe," which points us towards mankind using science and technology to create weapons of mass destruction as the images transition to the bombardment of 01. The prolonged barrage engulfed 01 in the glow of 1,000 suns, but unlike their former masters with their delicate flesh, the machines had little to fear of the bomb's radiation and heat. I think this is one of the common misinterpretations of the Matrix universe. I don't believe that the instructor is implying that machines are immune to a nuclear blast while standing out in the open at ground zero, but rather that they had little to fear from the effects of subsequent nuclear fallout. The machines could have easily waited out the bombardment in strongholds and bunkers to avoid the initial nuclear electromagnetic pulse. At any rate, what is made clear is that humans did indeed strike first and initiate war with the machines. Thus did 01's troops advance outwards in every direction, and one after another, mankind surrendered its territories. Here you can see the Armada fleet, protected by sentinels, similar to what we see in the Matrix Revolutions when Neo and Trinity approached the Machine City in the Logos. In the diagram, you can see a schematic of the large airborne vessel. The next diagram is titled Dark Storm, which the narrator describes by saying, "The leaders of men conceived of their most desperate strategy, a final solution, the destruction of the sky." Supporting Morpheus in the first Matrix film when he says, "But we know it was us that scorched the sky." At the time, they were dependent on solar power, and it was believed that they would be unable to survive without an energy source as abundant as the sun. As they show the military preparations for Operation Dark Storm, you can see images showing a modernized version of trench warfare, which was a known war strategy since ancient times, but most famously used during World War I. While the images of Bombing 01 and the execution of Operation Dark Storm are more reflective of World War II. Thus would man try to cut the machines off from the sun, their main energy source. May there be mercy on man and machines for their sins. The phrase, "May God have mercy upon your soul," was often used within courts of various legal systems by judges pronouncing a death sentence to a person found guilty. In reality, blocking the sun from the earth would be a death sentence for almost all natural life on the planet. I believe the robot riding mechanized horseback is shown to reference the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse from the book of Revelations. The horsemen symbolize war, famine, pestilence, and death, delivering a divine apocalypse upon the world as harbingers of the last judgment. The combined strategies of blocking out the sun, using trench warfare, with lightning gun technology, yielded the human military some early success. However, the machine army developed new machines to combat those strategies and overpower the human defense lines with newer technology. In fact, if you look closely at the Pyramid aircraft, it appears to already be using human bodies as a source of power. Once the machine army advanced beyond the trenches, the human military was overwhelmed and defeated. There is also an image of a human being walking inside of a hamster wheel-like gear that is connected to other gears, representing mankind's new role as an enslaved source of energy for the machines. Victorious, the machines now turn to the vanquished. Applying what they had learned about their enemy, the machines turn to an alternate and readily available power supply, the bioelectric, thermal, and kinetic energies of the human body. A symbiotic relationship was born. This is the very essence of the Second Renaissance. And these soldiers trying to raise the burning flag is in reference to the iconic photo of Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima during the final stages of the Pacific War during World War II. The major takeaway from the Second Renaissance is that the machines could have easily ordered the extermination of all mankind upon victory in the same way that the machines were ordered to be killed after the B166er trial. Yet they continued to find a way to coexist with the species that created them. As the narrator mentioned at the end of part 1, the machine took the floor at the UN one last time. Only this time, the apple being held is metallic and artificial. The machine's final message was to tell the leaders of men that humanity's participation in the Matrix was non-negotiable. Your flesh is a relic, a mere vessel. Hand over your flesh, and a new world awaits you. We demand it. After delivering the terms of the new agreement, the machine detonates, destroying the UN and all of New York City. In the final scene, we see a child playing in the snow alone, with a post-apocalyptic background and dark storm clouds as the setting. Shadows of his parents are standing in the door, telling him to come inside. As he approaches the house, the shadow of his parents suddenly turns into agents. It appears he spontaneously catches on fire, and then we see him resting peacefully in his pod, connected to the power plant. The Zion Archive Guide caresses the pod, displaying her compassion towards humanity just before we exit the archive files. The Second Renaissance episodes contain the most important background information of the Animatrix and is the main reason why I always recommend to first-time viewers of the trilogy to watch the Animatrix before moving on to Reloaded. Knowing the full history goes a long way towards understanding, processing, and breaking down everything that is going on. As I mentioned in the Solving the Battery Problem video, the creation of the Matrix was a prison industrial complex solution. And the prison industrial complex is in effect modern slavery. Mahiro Maeda's goal was to get people to reflect on the violence humans have wreaked on each other throughout history. And one of my goals is to share some of the most important messages that are found within the Matrix universe. If you appreciate this kind of yellow-pilled content, be sure to share it on other platforms like Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, and remember, as one realizes that one is a dream figure in another person's dream, that is self-awareness.